Hello and welcome to Upside, where every week we dig behind the headlines affecting European venture. Today it is Mads and myself, and what are we talking about? Well, we're going to look at why Nvidia is giving billions back to shareholders. We've got the Great IPO Unfreeze and why this all matters for Europe. 3 new deals that put European sovereignty into action. We'll look at those. What should Europe do now the American public is rebelling against AI? What to look out for in the week ahead? And predictions plus deals of the week. Awesome, my good man. What is new with you?
It's been a good week. We've had a nice event over at the BBCA, or the artist formerly known as BBCA. Now it's called UK Private Capital.
Yes.
And discussing such exciting things such as how do we get more pension money into public markets and IPOs.
Any answers? Did anyone come up with anything novel or action?
I do think there is insights to be had and shared. I think the remedies are actually quite well known. The question, I think, is political will now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, same fallback then. How do the politicians actually action it? Well, hopefully it'll happen because, as we know, it needs to. What else have I looked at this week? So some other news that I saw this week that we're not going to dig into this much, but just to I thought it was quite interesting was the Musk-Altman case thrown on a technicality. I saw loads of kickback to that. Ben Evans has released his latest AI is Eating the World report, and there are some really interesting nuggets. If people haven't seen it, look up benedictevans.com, I think it is, or ben-evans.com. ASML upgraded their 26 revenue, so that's our own European awesome chip manufacturing plant manufacturer. They've upgraded their 26 revenue by about 15% into the 40 billion or so. European Commission has opened the MiCA consultation. So this, for those that don't know, is the crypto regulation. That's all possibly coming into force in July, but they're looking at if it still holds water and makes sense. And also Meta laying off 8,000 engineers, fueled by AI capex, but will that mean more software talent coming over here? Don't know. Google announcing, I don't know if you saw this, Google announcing that they are going to basically make their search look and feel like Anthropic and ChatGPT. So that's going to be an interesting moment in time. See how many people don't like that. And I also saw that the US government is putting $2 billion into quantum and taking equity into a bunch of businesses. So they're the kind of, we're not going to talk about much of that, but they were the things going on behind the scenes. But the biggie where I think we should start is Nvidia. And this is where basically the whole AI economy starts, stops, lives and breathes. They are giving 80 billion back to shareholders this year, which is about, it's not much to them. It's roughly 3 months in current revenue or roughly the GDP of Tunisia. And they're handing it back pretty much because they can't bloody deploy it. So free cash flow hit 49 billion last quarter. So why not pump the price? Q1, for some context, Q1 rev came in at 81.6 billion, up 85% year on year. Q2 guidance at 91 billion. So they're still raking in the cash. Stock is up 19.8% year to date, sorry. For comparison, the S&P trades at around 22 times forward earnings. And I know, Mads, you're going to dig into some of the details around this as well. Nvidia stock has nearly doubled since April, but it's also gotten cheaper. So mixed messages. What's happening with Nvidia? Give us the inside scoop, my man.
You're right, Dan. It's such an important company because it really is the bellwether for the global AI economy. And it's where all the cash is ending up right now. Everybody's spending money, right? We've got, we were saying that Anthropic became accidentally profitable for a blip in Q1 and actually might turn a profit in Q2. But other companies are burning. OpenAI being one of them, but hyperscalers, of course, as well. Although they're profitable on paper, of course, there's a lot of capex that's flowing out of them. They're investing and buying assets that then get depreciated over years. And all the capital, all the money ends up with semiconductors and nowhere more so than with Nvidia, which is why they are pumping out cash to no end. And there was a sense of almost disappointment this week in the sense that they, announced their earnings and they did really well, as you said. The revenue was up 85% year on year, which is pretty good when you're already sort of an $81 billion revenue business. Solid
It was the free cash flow that got me. I mean, they're doing 49 billion free cash flow. That's just nuts, right?
It's bananas. And even so, it's been trading down a couple of percentage points here over the last few days. And it's like, whoa, are we disappointed? I think that's a bit of a flash in the pan. Look, it's just a bit of profit taking. They are, as you say, up 16, 17, 18% year to date. They've more than doubled since the April lows. So if you bought in a short while ago, you would have made a lot of money. A couple of questions about why, as you were saying, the forward price earnings multiple is looking as low as it is. Kind of the forward guidance on the fiscal year 28. So that's effectively there 2027. So next year is a price earnings multiple of 19, which is nuts for a company that's growing like this. And I think to some extent it's almost disbelief that this can continue, right? People are looking at it like, there's just no way.
There's the fear of the future, isn't there? They're just a bit invested into like pricing in the fear of the future now.
There's just no way they can keep it up. Can hyperscalers really keep spending at this clip? Can they go beyond 1 trillion in CapEx over the course of the next year or two? The other biggie is power. If you listen to Musk, he'll say, many others, he'll say, listen, by the end of the year, we are finally and totally power constrained. Like we won't be able to stand up any more capacity really without major shifts, of course, and we're going to go back to the SpaceX IPO later on. So this is it. I mean, if these constraints weren't there, this would just look like a super cheap stock and you should pile in. But there is some of that concern in the markets.
Well, let's talk about the kind of the IPO unfreeze. So the layer below Nvidia, if you like. So the IPO market looks like it's about to unfreeze. SpaceX filed publicly on the 20th, so time recording 2 days ago, to list at about 1.75 to 2 trillion-ish, a 75 billion raise-ish, making it the largest IPO in history. Same day, OpenAI started preparing filings, debuting over 1 trillion. They're currently at about 850 with revenue at about 2 billion a month. So, and also the same day, Anthropic disclosed that it hit 11 billion in Q2, up 130% in one quarter, posting its first operating profit. Now, they're also looking at an October IPO. They're considering it. Why is this important to Europe? Now, this is massively, and I'm sure I don't need to tell our audience about this, but there are many reasons. How our companies are priced, where they sell, where they exit, but possibly, argue with me if you don't agree, where I think is most important is all our LPs are in American publics. They need DPI. We need this recycler capital. Interesting fun fact, the US markets have roughly 5 times the daily liquidity of all European markets combined. So that's a big chunk of cash flowing around. And also, incidentally, I also saw Unitree's IPO, the robotics company in China, listing on the Shanghai markets, I think. That might be interesting to note for Europe. If you have any notes on that, dig into that as well. But first up, what's the scoop on the IPO unfreeze and how is this all going to unfold for us?
Yes, 100%. So you're right. Those are 3 extremely consequential IPOs. I mean, they are possibly some of the most important ones of the decade. And therefore it's exciting to see them all come up at the same time. I mean, if we unpack SpaceX first, because that's the one that's, right in front of us, but it's also the one that's maybe the oddest, right? You got a company that's sort of sub 20 billion in revenue, looking to go public at sort of up to a $2 trillion market cap, which just seems completely bizarre. And in some ways, it is an AI IPO that's wrapped in a rocket business that really, in turn, is wrapping a telecoms business. Because the fundamentals are that the rocket business is super cool, but it's not very big and is losing money. And actually, the main driver of cash flow and of profitability of this business today is Starlink. Which is super cool in itself. But it's providing internet access. Like it's not, it's great providing remote internet access, but that's maybe not super transformative. And probably in and of itself, what couldn't fetch a $2 trillion valuation. So where does the excitement come from? Well, it's all about AI. We spoke earlier about the constraint and the shortage of power on planet Earth, the inability of us to keep standing up more and more AI capacity and AI compute. And Musk's whole idea is, look, we'll just send it into space. It's super easy to get the power from the sun there, and so we can build
all
massive
physics be damned. Sure, let's go for it.
Well, exactly. But he sort of says, like, within 3 years, that's going to be where most of the new AI capacity will be stood up. It seems unlikely, but could it be directionally correct and just on the time scales? Maybe not. Who knows? There are a couple of other things to it, which is that as he has entered this new, AI mega race, he's going to need a lot of cash. And so, SpaceX was actually quite an attractive business in and of its own, and probably didn't need this kind of cash that they're talking about now, sort of raising $75 billion. But with all the AI stuff he's doing on XAI, building models, building data centers, and trying to build them now in space, he will need cash. And so they are looking to raise.
XAI is burning a bunch, isn't XAI burning something like $2 billion a month or something crazy? I'll check on that, but there's a big burn in there, isn't there?
Yes, you'll recall they stood up their two massive data centers, but actually ended up leasing one of them to Anthropic.
I saw that. There's some kind of, is it a 3 or a 5 year deal for billions? Is it 45 billion or something crazy?
It's a lot of money, and you're absolutely right. What's happening is he built the two Colossus data centers. The first one was stood up in a way that was heterogeneous. So they had different GPU types in there, which made it less useful for training, but great for inference. So he was not actually able to get much yield out of it for his own work. Plus, he could probably do with the cash. Anthropic was massively compute constrained. And oh, by the way, it so happens that Musk is not a huge fan of OpenAI, which is Anthropic's main competitor. So
I forgot about that. Of course, a little political FU to Sam. Got it.
100%. Yeah. So Anthropic got the compute, Musk got the money and the ability to stick two fingers up at Sam Altman. And everybody except for Sam, I guess, won in this.
Everybody's happy.
Everybody's a winner. Well, Sam's certainly trying to be. I mean, let's jump on to OpenAI. Looks like there'll be a filing this week, targeting an IPO also this year. It's slightly smaller than SpaceX. They're looking at a $1 trillion.
Is that all pocket change?
Yeah, a trill here, a trill there. What will be really, really interesting is that in many ways, this S1, this filing will be the most consequential financial disclosure in tech of the decade, because we are finally going to see what are the real subscription economics of ChatGPT. What is the real, what are the real inference costs per query? What is really going on with the Microsoft relationship, the full depths of it? We've been guessing about this stuff for years.
It ain't going to be pretty. I'll put money. It ain't going to be pretty, but anyway, we'll see.
Well, it's going to have to be pretty enough to get the IPO underwritten. So but I should say, we'll see how they structure it. You will recall that they raised more than $100 billion earlier this year, and one could be forgiven for asking, why would they need to IPO? Well, they are spending so much money. They've got the whole Stargate mission. He's committed to more than $500 billion in capex. He needs the cash, and he needs access to the cash. And so right now in private markets, Anthropic is the darling. There were rumors that people were struggling to sell OpenAI shares as secondaries. So the hope for Sam and the OpenAI team, I think, is, look, we'll IPO, we'll be able to tap the public markets, and that means we'll continue to be able to get access to the cash we need to actually pay for all the capex we've committed to.
What about, I know this is a slightly sideways question, but what about Unitree? What is, I'm just intrigued by humanoid robots. So maybe this is a very selfish kind of request, but any thoughts, comments on the Unitree listing? And also, is there any impact for Europe or anything that we could draw back to us, do you think?
We 100% have to pay attention. It's a much smaller IPO, $6 to $7 billion in valuation. It's in China. That's not typically where, we focus our Klieg lights, right, where we focus our discussion here in Europe. Just a little bit of background on why it's important. So who is Unitree? It's a 10-year-old company founded in Huangzhou back then. And what they're famous for today is, what we've all seen is the dancing robot, right? Kind of the G1, this viral dancing humanoid robot that they are now selling for, it's sub 20K. I think you can get one for $16,000, which if you have 16,000 spare might be a cool thing to buy. What's cool about them beyond that? Well, they're shipping. They've shipped more than 5,000 of these. And if you look at the kind of Western competitors, the Figure, the Tesla Optimus, that's all internal stuff. But Unitree are actually shipping, they're selling to third parties. And that means that all these robots today are two things. They're going into labs all over the world where people are using them the way people are using Raspberry Pis, right, to test, to play, to develop SDKs, to figure out how are we going to get humanoid robots into some kind of production system or some kind of real world application. And what's interesting then is that will give a lot of data, and they're setting hundreds of millions of dollars aside to use all that data to develop an embodied large model that then becomes the AI for the robot. So this is the whole idea. That's why we have to pay attention, because of course, if you believe in the humanoid robotic story, and whether it'll be like, Elon Musk will say it'll all be humanoids, and I think some of us will say, look, it'll not all be humanoids, but they'll certainly still have a role. It will be important who controls that stack. So the hardware, the software, and everything else. And this could become, it's kind of the Android of humanoid robotics. And that's why Unitree is such an important IPO.
And also, I mean, it feels very BYD-ish, where they're throwing this canary down the coal mine and then they can collect all the data and do all the clever things they want to. I also wonder how much, is there an opportunity for European startups or businesses to build their own layer on top of this hardware? I've always kind of seen that as a bit of a strategic play. Let the Chinese work out this incredible hardware kit, and then we just build our layer on top. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you can build a business on top of it, and can you build applications on top of it too? Probably. I mean, there is an SDK, right? You can build with it and to it, and a lot of this is now about figuring out how can you include this kind of humanoid robotics in your daily workflow. So can you use it in a dark kitchen? Can you use it on a factory floor? Can you use it to, I don't know, clean up some kind of warehouse, right? And this is what we don't know yet, right? This is what we're all need to figure out.
But you would argue, I mean, if we were talking to founders, like, it feels a bit like if you build it, they will come. So we've kind of got this incredible tech, and now we're trying to find some use cases for it. I'm sure they're there. I'm not saying they're not, but it almost feels cart horse. It just feels a bit odd, but it'll be so interesting to see how this plays out. And I think there is a real opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember when Steve Jobs and Apple launched the iPad, and kind of people were joking that, what are we ever going to use that for? And what's the point, right? And it turned out there was a point. And I do think there is some of that with some of the stuff.
Yeah. No, fair. Well, let's bring it properly back to Europe rather than surmising.
Do you want to skip? I mean, we haven't really had our Anthropic corner today.
Do it.
There's been the will they, won't they on the IPO side. And
where are you landing?
At least they have to IPO. Okay. They must IPO, right? And there was all the talk at the start of the year.
I'll take the counter.
They've now done their fourth. They're now doing closing up their fourth round, round where they're saying this is the final round before IPO. They've done that 3 more times in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And the label keeps moving just because the price keep going up and they have so much capital thrown at them. But it has to be a public company. It's the business everybody wants to buy into. Oh, absolutely. It must be. It is the most important business on the planet.
I'm not convinced.
It's a more important company than SpaceX.
Well, do you think it will depend on how SpaceX and OpenAI do? Do you reckon they'll be watching?
Without a doubt. Of course.
And also, I'm so intrigued as to where all this cash is going to come from. I noticed there were some rule changes where there will be some automatic cash deploy into the floats, and I'm super intrigued as to how the cash is in the markets are going to rebalance and serve all of these mega tech floats. I don't know. I don't see how that's going to play.
Absolutely right. So this is one to watch for next week. Actually, on our outlook is on Thursday next week. There is a rule change deadline for the S&P 500.
Yeah.
And there's some rules today, which is saying for companies to be included, they have to be profitable, and they have to wait for a period of time from listing until they can be included in the S&P 500 index.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the sooner they get into the index, the sooner everybody who's tracking the index, all passive trackers, etc., they have to get in it. So yes, just by virtue of those companies being in the index, and they should be, OpenAI, Anthropic, and SpaceX should be in the S&P 500.
They're all 50% of the S&P. I mean, it's megatech is a massive chunk of what's happening at the moment.
Because that's where the global value creation is taking place, right? So if you think about that as a proxy for the at least the American economy and the global economy, it's hard to think about excluding those businesses. But equally, when they're included, a lot of the capital will flow in just as a function of that.
And it's quite a small float, isn't it? I mean, the SpaceX float is only 75 bill, which is proportionally quite small. It almost doesn't seem enough, according to the burn. But we'll see. Exciting. All right. Okay. So let's really drill down into Europe and some sovereignty in action. So we have 3 deals as we're waiting for the American capital markets to unfreeze and hopefully get some liquidity flowing. Let's talk about some how, I guess, Europe is writing its own future. 3 deals landing this week. First up, we've got Mistral acquiring Vienna's EMMIE AI, their second M&A in 3 months. Now, they look like they're pivoting hard into industrial physics simulation. What are your thoughts on this acquisition?
We've been saying for a while that the frontier labs, they have to be application companies. It's not enough to just have a model. You have to have an application or links to an application on top. Mistral, they have done a lot of work with corporates. They've really been actually possibly a little bit ahead of what Anthropic and OpenAI did. Mistral have been working directly with corporates to implement and the services around.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I always figured they kind of gave up on the foundation. Not gave up, but they almost thought, okay, we need to go early into the application layer. We can see the future. It was always my thinking.
Yeah. No, and I think that's right. And what they're doing here with EMMIE. So who is EMMIE? Well, it's a company that was founded just a couple of years ago in 2024 in Austria. They raised a nice big seed round at the time, 15 million euros. And that's sort of what they've been raised, all that's been raised since then. What they're developing are what they call neural surrogates for physics. And what does that mean? Well, if you think about designing any kind of engineering application, you have to go through historically simulation, computational fluid dynamics and other types of simulation, where you try to work out how is this car or this aircraft, this fighter jet, going to behave in the real world once we actually make the thing. And of course, you can make the hardware, you can put it into a wind tunnel, you can do some measurements, but it's really expensive. So if you can simulate it ahead of time, that's better. The challenge with simulation is it's computationally very, very intensive. And so it will take a long time to simulate each design. And if you want to explore a design space, you want to figure out, well, what shape should my fighter jet have? Or what shape should my Formula One car have to make it most aerodynamic, to make it faster, to minimize drag, all that stuff? Then it's much better if you can explore a big design space quickly. And that's really hard to do with simulation. And so the whole idea of these next-gen models is to say, well, instead of using simulation, we'll use AI, kind of machine learning-based models that quickly can explore a huge design space to see what are all these different design options going to yield in terms of output. And so that's exactly what EMMIE was doing. Another company, UK company that's in a similar space is PhysicsX. Now Mistral have acquired EMMIE, and it kind of shows us a little bit about where they think the puck is going to and where they're skating to.
Yeah, I think that the sovereign play is important, and I wish them every success. The second story in the sovereign play was the European Innovation Council. They've gone with EQT to manage the 5 billion Scale Up Europe Fund. They beat Atomico in the final round with Eurozone, North Zone, and Vitruvian all falling out in previous rounds. Any insight, thoughts on the EIC deal with EQT?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, firstly, let's just pick up on where you left off. Why did they win? As you say, there were several competitors. Eurozone,
and it's the who's who, right? I mean,
Atomico.
who's who are European funds. So yeah,
certainly some of the bigger groups. I think why did they win? They've got a very good pedigree. They've got many unicorns in their stables. They're known as a big firm that's well run. They're great at picking, great at supporting. There was possibly also a sense that, we compare them to Atomico. Well, Atomico comes from more of a VC heritage. So they have a small institutional platform. And you have Eurozone, which is possibly seen as maybe more of a French play, where I think EQT, they're up in Sweden, not necessarily seen as beholden to any of the big powers. Vitruvian, obviously here in London, so that would have been outside the EU. So I think there was sort of some political views as well as also EQT being a strong player. But why is it done? Why does it matter? If you look at the capital that's being deployed in the US, Sequoia's growth fund alone is $7.5 billion, we've got massive funds investing at the growth stage on the other side of the pond. In Europe, we've done things through the EIF, through the British Business Bank and other institutions to prime the early stage venture ecosystem. And that's worked, right? Today, we have a venture ecosystem. We didn't 20 years ago. We don't have the pension fund capital that the Americans do. US pension funds, they allocate 25, 30% to alternatives, and a portion of that is venture. That just doesn't happen in Europe.
No.
European pension funds don't invest in venture. And so there is no capital base to fund the growth stage. And so that's the intent here is to sort of show that it can be done, to create a fund, create a track record, and then use that to hopefully crowd in more capital over time.
Yeah, I think the awful stat here is something like 0.2% or something. And ironically, I guess a lot of UK pension funds are invested in American venture through other channels. So hopefully we can get some European activity swirling around. The last on my sovereign list here was the deal I saw this week. HMRC awarded London-based Quantexa 175 million on a 10-year sovereign data and AI contract. Sure, not the 900 million awarded to the American firm Palantir, and I would put them in the competitive buckets. I don't know how you see Quantexa and Palantir, but I put them in the same bucket. But it warmed my heart and felt like a step in the right direction. We're owning the full stack from vendor all the way through supply. But any thoughts on the Quantexa deal?
Yes, I'm delightfully torn on this because I always want everybody, to have, whether government or private, to have the very best tech they can. And I think Palantir is the obvious choice for this because they are ahead. They're were the first to develop the type of platform they have. They've done more of this work everywhere than anybody else. And so it seems like, that seems like the obvious choice. And it probably would have been the obvious choice. They already run other contracts for the NHS. They run contracts for the MOD, the Home Office. But a decision was made to buy British. And I haven't used the Quantexa platform. I don't know how good it is, and if it is as good, comparable. But you could argue you don't need to have total feature parity as long as you get the job done. And if that's something that helps support that local ecosystem and puts Quantexa in a position to compete for other things, it is on balance probably a good thing.
As long as it's not the B player, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's always the fear, is that you go with something that's local just because it's local, and you end up with local government and how the people that are trying to run the country running on inferior technology, which is not what we want either.
No, I totally agree. I mean, they have a slightly different data approach and different offerings. I mean, Palantir have got Gotham and what's the other product they have? But there's a very different commercial approach and a very different data approach. So we'll see. I think they look pretty solid, but we'll find out. Last on the list, but not least, and it's a bit of an odd one for us because we are talking about an American public rebellion against AI. Now, most of us will remember the Luddites from our history lessons in the first Industrial Revolution, which guided the American labor movement. Then the neo-Luddism, we might remember this from our history lessons in the 80s with the very famous Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and his anti-tech and anti-computerization bombing protests that went on for 17 years. Now, Americans are really, really turning against AI. AI now polls worse than both ICE, their internal enforcement police, and politicians. 69% of Americans don't trust government to regulate AI. And the movement is now moving on to throwing Molotov cocktails at Sam Altman's house, sacking councillors who approve AI data centers. We've seen more strikes in Hollywood with all the creatives. And we're getting a grassroots, 100 new communities in 12 states protesting against AI in some way, shape, or form. A recent study over here by King's College revealed that 22% of the British public believe that AI will eliminate jobs fast enough to cause civil unrest, which is pretty serious. That percentage is triple by most of the similar polls in the States. So there's a very big anti-AI movement going on over there. And I don't know if you saw Eric Schmidt for the first time being booed at a commencement speech in the University of Arizona over his AI commentary. I thought that was really interesting. So I guess my question kind of boils down to, is there somewhere where we can capitalize on this? And, or at least should we be learning and preparing for how we deal with a similar backlash on this side of the pond? Where would you start with this one, Matt?
Learning and preparing, I think, is important. It's probably also important to sort of disentangle some of the different vectors of how you can look at AI, because the truth is, AI might be unpopular in the US, but AI usage is still rising.
Yeah.
So people sort of conflate the idea of AI and the buildings, the data centers, but the chatbot is still super popular. I think what happened was there was a very real impact of data centers in North Virginia, in the whole area around Washington. You've had thousands of data centers being stood up. You've got more than 5,000 data centers across the US, which is almost fivefold what we have in Europe. And so what's happened is that that has impacted energy prices. For many people have seen an increase of hundreds of dollars a year in their utility bills. And that's
at a time
popular,
when
right?
everything's going, at a time when gas prices for Americans is near $5,
100%.
groceries. This is being baked into the world is burning. Oh, and you rich people want to do stuff that's going to destroy my jobs and make my energy prices go up and water provision go down and all this stuff. So I can feel it.
That's it. Dario Amodei, bless him, he's sort of been using the doomer story to get headlines.
Yeah,
every time
he's still going on it, isn't he? Yeah.
Every time he's out racing around, right? It's been a great way for him to get headlines. And I mean, you saw what they did with Mythos, which is possibly some of the best tech PR I've ever seen. I mean, it's kind of stand-up tech, make it look really powerful, and then make sure nobody can get access, right? Everybody's just desperate.
Brilliantly PR'd.
It's just exceptional. Corporate leaders have been culprits as well, because every time they need to do a RIF, kind of reduction in force, they've been able to say, it's AI. It's not, we haven't been managing our workforce for the last 2 years. We need to restructure. No, it's AI. So all this stuff is coming together to make AI unpopular. And then, of course, the populist politicians are jumping on it. Bernie Sanders, he's doing what he can. There's been some astroturfing going on. So now every time there is a new data center being stood up, there are issues and there are crises. I think Europe is in a different place because we haven't had as many new data centers being stood up yet, but we also have very different utility markets, right? They're regulated completely differently. Energy prices are typically different for consumers and for businesses. The layoff story is different because in many parts of Europe, you just can't lay off people. So we, right, or at least it's very, very hard. So we haven't had that same impact yet. And what do I think is important? But it's absolutely important that of course, we need to stand up new data centers, but we've got to make sure that the power question is solved in a way that doesn't lumber ordinary households with increased utility bills. That's got to be number one. And I think Trump, he was out last year and sort of saying, look, we got to make sure that the big businesses, the hyperscalers, they pay for the energy, but the cat was already out of the bag, right? It had already happened. So they were a bit late on that. We know what's coming. We got to be ahead of that game. And then I guess just also, think about how can we make sure we couple it with the right amount of economic growth. The AI and the new data centers are not going to solve everything on their own. We got to deregulate. We got to do clever things in other part of the economy to get to the wins we need. So lots of things need to come together here.
I'm going to keep my eye on what we should be watching and learning from. I guess there's going to be a bunch of click rage in the press on this topic and where the reality is and what Europe can learn. And I'm sure we'll come back to it on future pods. Right. We have, I've got a prediction. I'm not sure that you have, but let me know if you do. My prediction is, so many people will have seen a semi-famous story this week of a senior researcher from Mistral resigning and joining Anthropic in the Bay and writing a very detailed X or tweet or whatever they're called these days, explaining why. And it's since been deleted, so don't try and look for it because for some reason the tweet has been deleted. And the short version was, to paraphrase him, is basically saying that Europe and especially France is just too expensive. There's a tax and incentive problem for founders and their employees in startups. So my prediction is that by the end of this year, France will change its ESOP and tax structures, and Mistral will effectively force the French government to legislate a US-style stock option with taxation tweaks by the end of 26. What do you reckon?
I will take the other side of that bet. I absolutely don't see that happening. I do think the tweet was very interesting. And it was, I think, about more than just tax and incentives. It was also it was also about the spirit of why we are here. And I think the sense he had was, look, when I'm in France, I still have to spend all my time debating whether we should use energy for data centers or AI or not. And actually, I just want to build the future. And I think AI is going to change the world, and I want to be part of that. And I don't want to be caught in this virtue signaling swamp of always going back to first principles. So, should we even have a capitalist world, or should we just, stop economic growth? It feels like this feels so regressive.
Sounds like a very French conversation. The irony being, though, that the French have got more energy than they can swing a cat at. So there is a slight kind of weird paradox in that. But sorry, I interrupted you.
Yes, no, other debates about that, and just kind of the whole kind of European, especially French intellectual discourses influence on kind of the whole global woke movement, and how all of that has been impacting us in different places.
There must be, because it feels quite schizophrenic for the French, because they're really pushing the sovereign angles, as we've seen through Mistral. So it's weird to have both sides of the conversation baked into the same tweet. But anyway, shame it's not still online.
Don't forget the French government. Macron, he's famously unpopular, and sort of basically scrambling through. Right? I mean, they can't really govern the country anymore until there's an election, and it will be probably either far right or far left that wins the next election.
Yeah. And it's the wrong time to happen, because France is broke. So this will be civil unrest, which the French are very good at, without casting any aspersions anywhere. Deal of the week, you've got one. What is it? And it looks fabulous. Tell us more.
Isomorphic Labs, very, very cool. $2.1 billion Series B.
Go Demis! Boom!
Second largest biotech round ever. And Thrive led the round again, so same lead as the Series A last year. Lots more money.
2.1 billion Series B. I just want to flag that in inverted commas. 2 billion round. Series B.
It's a decent round. But who else is in? A UK sovereign AI fund is in, Temasek, MGX, and of course also Alphabet and Google Ventures. So the valuation was reported at 15 to 20 billion, but I don't think the company has confirmed. I don't think we've seen the number yet. Why is Isomorphic Labs a cool and important company? So they use technology, AI technology developed at DeepMind to develop new drugs. Kind of AlphaFold to predict how molecules grip, AlphaProteo to design new proteins from scratch. It's absolutely amazing science created right here in London. They've got pharma validation already in place. There are agreements with Lilly, with Novartis. I think it's fair to say nothing has actually been put into patients yet. This is all on pipeline, but there's commercial appetite to buy, to take off what they are looking to develop. And of course, we care about it because when we talk about the AI economy and what's happening around the world, this is the most significant European AI financing in memory. And it's built right here in London, and it's a bloody cool thing.
And just to remind listeners or viewers, wherever you are, that Demis has a day job and goes to Isomorphic at 6 p.m. and then works till butt munch o'clock in the morning. And it's such a story on so many levels, what they're doing, how they're changing the world, how they operate, obviously now raising a huge Series B. It's just, I wish every piece of goodness in my body for success on this one, and long may they stay in London. Week ahead, my dude. I've got not much this week because I'm away. I'm at a conference in Amsterdam for most of next week, but you've got some more kind of structured bits and some Salesforce and some SpaceX-y bits. What's happening in the week ahead?
Well, yeah. So, SaaS apocalypse redux. I mean, Salesforce, they had been beaten up, right, on SaaS companies. Are they going to be threatened by AI? Stocks down 30% year to date. They're going to announce their earnings next week, and people are going to be looking out for what's happening at Salesforce. Is Agentforce, kind of their agentic AI offering, is that going to start growing? Are we going to see the revenue numbers, or is there going to be some misery hidden there? And
have you heard anything about Agentforce? I've heard nothing about Agentforce, good or bad, to be fair. Have you heard anything?
to be fair, this is very enterprisey. So this is sort of almost SAP territory. It's the stuff that's unglamorous and unsexy.
I know, but I remember
do
you remember, was it maybe 18 months ago now? Do you remember the big, we're moving, we're pivoting, it's all agents, and we're just like this massive fanfare, and then nothing. So I wonder, we'll see this week, right?
We will absolutely see. We've also got on Tuesday, we've got kind of an AI stack. Snowflake is reporting, Marvell is reporting, HP and Dell are reporting, right? So that's a lot about kind of the hardware demand for data centers. So we'll get a sense for what's happening elsewhere in the AI ecosystem. And then the last thing is on Thursday is kind of this S&P 500 rule change deadline, which we spoke about earlier. So I'd say those are the three big things for next week.
We will maybe pick up next week. Anything else on your list? Any good, bad, ugly that you want to talk about before we go?
Summer has come to London. The barbecues are coming out.
We got a bank holiday weekend, if you're not in the UK, where there is sunshine. Maybe I've just jinxed it, but I was like, what? I looked at the weather forecast, but Mr. and Mrs. Weather, you know that it's a bank holiday, right? It should be peeing with rain. What the hell is going on? Yes, I'm going to enjoy that too with the kids. In that case, let's call it a day. I love you dearly. Thank you so much for your insights, and we'll catch you next week.
Right, back at you.